The morning bell at Veltros 9 Academy rang sharp as a laser beam, slicing through the antiseptic hush of the corridors. Glistening white panels lined the halls, and holographic banners depicting ancient star constellations drifted lazily overhead. Cadets in crisp uniforms scuttled between lessons, their chatter a low thrum of ambition and nerves. Yet one corner of the academy remained perpetually still, as if time itself dared not disturb it. Ilara Denshara sat at the very back of Professor Cow's Xenopsychic Theory lecture hall, a silent silhouette against the pulsating hollow equations that danced before the class. Her uniform was immaculate, the deep indigo of her academy blazer contrasted with the silver trim, and her boots, scuffed though meticulously polished, suggested long hours traversing the underdecks. But despite this disciplined appearance, something indefinably other clung to her, the weight of unspoken memories, the quiet intensity in her obsidian eyes. Professor Ian Cow, a gaunt man with steel-rimmed spectacles perched precariously on his nose, began the lecture with the same ceremonial flourish he performed every cycle. "Today," he announced, voice resonant, "we delve into the neural harmonics of telepathic resonance, how certain frequencies can amplify or dampen psychic signals across interstellar distances." Behind him, spiraling glyphs and waveforms shimmered in 3 dimensions. Cadets leaned forward, styluses poised to record every detail. Whispers floated through the rows. "She's never spoken a word." "Have you seen her in the dining hall?" "They say she's from Deathworld." But among all the rumors, none dared address her directly. Ilara's silence was legendary and deeply unsettling. Cow's gaze swept over the class, pausing on Ilara. He adjusted his spectacles. "Miss Denshara, yes, you in the back. Would you care to explain why a dampening field appears around an active mind link when pulsar frequencies exceed threshold?" His tone was clinical, yet edged with genuine curiosity. Some cadets suspected he'd chosen her deliberately, hoping to draw her out. Nothing stirred. Ilara's lips remained sealed, unflinching. Even her pupil didn't flicker. The professor cleared his throat. "Very well." He turned to the hollow board and sketched the answer in swift, precise strokes. Murmurs rippled through the hall, like starlight across a dark ocean. Frustration, pity, fascination. After the lecture, the cadets spilled into the corridor in a swirl of data tablets and murmured theories. Ilara gathered her things with mechanical grace. No one approached her. It was as though an invisible barrier repelled every attempt at conversation. Even the Academy's advanced etiquette protocols seemed powerless against her solitude. She paused at a panel of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Academy courtyard. Beyond, silver spires rose against the lavender sky, and the low hum of grav lifts drifted upward. A pair of second-year cadets rummaged through their datapads, glancing her way before conspiring in hushed tones. "They say she was the sole survivor when Deathworld fell," one murmured. "Psychic fallout so intense it wiped out a military division," the other replied, eyes wide. Ilara felt a familiar tug in her chest. The corridors blurred, and for a moment the Academy dissolved into memory. Blinding storms, razor-sharp winds tearing at her skin, the ground trembling beneath the roar of collapsing tectonic plates. She gripped her hollow tablet until her knuckles whitened, pulling herself back to the polished calm of Veltros 9. A soft beep announced an incoming ping. She tapped the corner of her tablet, bringing up her personal log interface. 4 unread messages, all from her sponsor, Admiral Reese Montclair. Brief and to the point. Subject, status report message, keep up appearances, we're under observation. She stared at the message and typed a single word in return. Acknowledged. No more, no less. In the bustling hub outside Professor Cow's hall, Ilara weaved through clusters of cadets. Holographic arrows guided her toward the next class, but she sidestepped them, opting for a quieter corridor that led to an observation deck. There, panoramic windows framed the glittering vastness of space. Freighters and patrol corvettes drifted against the backdrop of nebular dust. She stood at the glass, breathing in the scent of recycled oxygen and faint ionized metal. Even here, Thoughts buzzed around her like restless fireflies. Tales of her past, of the savage world she hailed from, of a tragedy so vast that no tutor dared broach it. Yet in her mind there was no chaos, only the steady pulse of something ancient and potent, lying dormant just beneath her skin. A voice crackled in her earpiece. 10 minutes until psychometric analysis, Denshara. Report to Lab 3. It was the crisp tone of Lieutenant Clares, an efficiency officer who monitored her progress. Elara closed her eyes. Analysis, assays, simulations. None could force the silence from her throat. She exhaled, and the air whooshed past her lips unnoticed. The silence around her felt like a living thing, cool and impenetrable. She turned and moved with deliberate calm. The psychometric lab was a stark chamber with sensor arrays arching overhead like metallic vines. Cadets strapped into neural docks whispered anxiously as technicians fine-tuned the signal amplifiers. When she entered, every eye turned. Even the technicians faltered, double-checking her docket. Denshara, Lieutenant Clares said, voice flat. Position yourself. She gestured to an open dock. Elara seated herself and allowed the text to secure the headband of crystalline conduits across her temples. Remember, Clares warned, we're testing for signal nullification under stress. Speak a trigger phrase to activate. The tech placed a command tablet before Elara. She read the phrase, mundane, clinical, and let her finger hover over the confirmation glyph. Her finger trembled, a rare crack in her composure. Then she withdrew it. Instead, Elara closed her eyes and drew in a steady breath. In the silence of her mind, she recited the phrase, without sound. The crystalline conduits glowed silver. The monitors around her flickered. Bars dipped, spiked, and flatlined. Unprecedented, a technician breathed. She nullified the entire array. A murmur ran through the room. Lieutenant Clare's jaw tightened. Shut it down. Now. Hands moved quickly. The conduits dimmed. Elara stood, palms at her sides, expression unreadable. She gathered her things and left without a backward glance. Outside the lab, the academy's corridors were emptying as evening classes began. Elara stepped into the dim light and felt the weight of countless eyes, cadets, instructors, observers pressing against her silence. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Silence, she'd learned, long ago was not weakness. It was a shield, a weapon. And in this academy of brilliant minds and relentless voices, her silence was the loudest thing any of them had ever heard. Night had fallen over Veltros 9 Academy, but the underdeck simmered with a hushed energy. Dim amber lights traced the contours of rusted access tunnels, and the low drone of life support vents echoed like distant thunder. Here, cadets rarely ventured. Rules forbade students from entering without authorization, but Elara Denshara moved through the labyrinthine corridors with practiced ease, as if she half remembered their every turn. She reached a blast-sealed hatch marked with Deadworld insignias, and placed a slender, gloved hand on the biometric reader. The panel glowed indigo and slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside lay an alcove carved from the ship's discarded scrap. Shattered control panels, fractured data cores, and at its center the obsidian shard. The shard was almost pulsing now, its surface a web of phosphorescent veins that mapped an alien geometry. Elara knelt before it on the oil-slicked deck, careful not to disturb the shards of metal strewn around. Her fingertips traced the glyphs, etched into the stone, each symbol a fragment of Deathworld's lost language. In the sterile hum of the underdeck, the shard's own resonance seemed to hum back. They had discovered Deathworld survivors months ago, a tiny cell of psychically gifted humans buried beneath kilometers of rubble. Admiral Montclair had dispatched biotech teams to excavate the site, and there, among the ruins, they found Elara clutching this shard. It had been her only companion through the planet's final cataclysm, and now it was theirs. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift outward, like ripples on a still pond. Memories rose unbidden. The scream of atom lances cleaving the atmosphere, the roar of fungal spires erupting in crimson blossoms, the way the soil itself had turned against her as she fled. Her heart thudded in her chest, cold as a frozen star, and she summoned the shard's resonance, listening for its voice. At first, there was nothing but a slow, throbbing pulse, an echo of the planet's last heartbeat. Then beneath it, a subsonic murmur grew, half-formed words that fluttered at the edges of her consciousness. She shaped them into meaning, and the shard replied in visions. She saw Deathworld as it had once been. Oceans of mercury mist, forests of crystalline vines that refracted starlight into prismatic storms, cities carved into living rock. She saw herself, a child, playing among luminescent groves while elders chanted in a tongue older than humanity. And then she saw the war fleets arriving like black comets, the seed pods tearing through planetary defenses, and the final pulse that snuffed out every spark of life. Aelara's breath caught. She clutched the shard to her chest, feeling its chill against her uniform. The visions spun faster, weaving grief and fury into a tapestry of power. She forced them to slow, to crystallize, until only one image remained, her homeworld's heart crying out. With great effort, she directed that cry outward. The shard gleamed white-hot, and a wave of psychic static washed through the underdeck. Metal groaned, pipelines rattled, and for a moment, the lights flickered. Aelara's focus wavered, and a spark of fear flickered along her spine. Fear of what she could unleash, fear of the silence that would follow. She steadied herself, drawing on a quieter strength. In the void of sound that enveloped her, she heard the shard's true voice, a soft, sibilant whisper that threaded through memory and mourning. It spoke not in words, but in the language of absence, of loss so profound that only silence could contain it. As the resonance faded, Aelara set the shard on a scorched metal plinth. Her knuckles ached from the intensity of the communion, but she felt cleansed, as though she had shared the weight of a dying world and emerged tempered. Somewhere beyond the hatch, the Academy's alarms proclaimed routine drills, but here in the underdeck, the only echo was her own slow heartbeat. Footsteps approached, sharp, precise. Aelara hid her trembling hand behind her back and turned. Claire stood in the doorway, jaw set, hydraulic servos whirring beneath her uniform. She held a datapad like a shield. "You were gone hours," Claire said. Her voice was flat, but her gaze flicked to the scorched plinth. "Unauthorized. Access. Containment breach." Aelara's eyes met hers, unafraid. "There was no breach," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "Only a recalibration." Claire's frowned. The shard's readings spiked off the charts. "You overloaded the filters and nearly triggered the hull integrity safeties." She tapped data on her pad. "Explain yourself." Aelara brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. The shard called. I answered. "Psychic shards don't call," Claire's shot back. "They're artifacts, cold, inert. Not to those who remember." Aelara's black eyes glimmered. "They carry echoes, memories that bleed into the present." Claire's hesitated, the pad's glow reflecting in her eyes. "You're unhinged," she muttered. "But you're also the Academy's greatest asset. Report to the infirmary for an evaluation. After that, you're on restriction." Aelara inclined her head. "Understood." Claire's turned and left, boots clicking against the grated floor. The hatch slid shut with a pneumatic sigh, sealing Aelara's confession within the underdeck. Alone again, she knelt before the shard, fingertips brushing its cool surface. Above her, the Academy droned on, oblivious to the storm gathering in her veins. She closed her eyes and whispered in the shard's silent tongue, "I remember." And somewhere in the depths of Deathworld's echo, the shard answered back. Dawn came without fanfare on Veltros 9, first as a pale lavender glow seeping through the Academy's sky glass, then as a harsh blaze when the command deck floodlights snapped on. The Great Hall, once the hub of lectures and simulations, had been transformed into a war room overnight. Holographic star charts floated above tiered consoles, and data stream banners scrolled urgent alerts in electric blue. At the head of the hall, a panoramic viewport framed the cold void beyond, where the Imperial Armada's dreadnoughts gathered like dark leviathans beneath a blood-red nebula. Cadets who'd once debated theoretical neural harmonics now manned turret fire schematics and shield grid diagnostics, their crisp uniforms replaced by grim battle gear. The air thrummed with controlled anxiety, each breath a countdown to conflict. Elara Denshara slipped quietly through the ranks, an observer in her own right. The rigid discipline of the defenders felt familiar, but her mind lingered elsewhere, tuned to frequencies no one else could hear. Screens displayed the Empire's approaching flotilla, squadrons of sleek cruisers trailing ion-wake tendrils, carriers bristling with fighter wings, and battle barges capable of laying entire cities to waste. Each vessel bore the black sigil of the crown, an emblem that to Elara's ears resonated with a low, ominous hum. She closed her eyes, and in that instant, the hum deepened into a chorus of muted voices, ghosts of Deathworld echoing through the void. General Mavros stood on the raised dais like an unshakable monolith. His silver hair, cropped close to his scalp, glinted under the hollow lamps. He extended a hand and the nearest screen zoomed in on enemy vectors. They'll cross the interdiction line in 45 minutes, he announced, voice booming through the amplifier grid. Our window to strike is narrow. Cadets, officers, you have your orders. We hold here or we die trying. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Phelan tapped commands that sent target lock coordinates to orbital batteries. Elara watched the tracer, lines arc across the viewport's expanse, imagining each as a thread of sound. In her mind, a complex symphony, in reality, a prelude to annihilation. She could taste the static on her tongue, a metallic tang reminding her that every moment might be her last. Somewhere in the commotion, a junior officer misread a grid and barked, "Shields at 70%. The announcement ricocheted through the hall, prompting a chorus of recalibration orders. Elara felt a pulse in her chest, an echo of the shield's faltering integrity, and reached out with her mind. She didn't touch the systems. She merely listened. The shield's energy currents whispered back, brittle and brittle. She inhaled sharply, uncertainty flaring in her gut. General Mavros's piercing gaze swept the room. "Status report." His voice cut through the static pulse in Elara's head, grounding her in the moment. Officers snapped to attention, reciting power grid efficiencies and weapons lock speeds. When it was Elara's turn, a nervous cadet stammered, "Psychometric echo is within parameters, ma'am." Mavros arched a brow. "And what are your parameters, cadet?" His tone softened only slightly. "Denshara, step forward." Elara did. Her boots clicked against the metal catwalk, and all eyes turned. The cadets knew her reputation, silence incarnate, and yet more dangerous than any warship. She climbed the dais beside Mavros, the roar of grav lifts and coolant pumps receding into an internal quietude she alone could own. "Report," Mavros said. Elara closed her eyes and exhaled, its whisper lost in the amplifier hum. "I sense a lull in their formation," she said, voice unpracticed but steady. "Their frontline cruisers are conserving energy, shields cycling slower than they should. They're preparing to redirect power to the Vanguard battle group." Mavros nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you. Coordinate with Commander Phelan. Prioritize, targeting their flank thrusters as they burn for position." Elara inclined her head, stepping aside. As she passed the hollow console, she laid a single hand on its edge. The circuit hum sharpened beneath her palm before smoothing into a soft resonance, as though welcoming a familiar tune. Phelan looked at her in surprise. "How did you—" Elara shrugged, the slightest curl of her lips betraying a hint of wry humor. "Just listening." Beyond the viewport, the distant shadows of war drew closer, a silent tide of steel and plasma. Yet within Elara, the storm had already begun. She felt the shard's lingering echo in her blood, a call she could no longer ignore. This was no mere siege simulation. It was a reckoning. And as the first flare of the Imperial lances ignited the space between, Elara stood ready, silence her shield, psychic resonance her sword. In the charged breath before battle, Every mind in the hall was attuned to the same dread question. Who would break first? The Empire or the girl who spoke only in silence? The first light of Veltros 9's twin suns glimmered pale and distant through the haze of ionized particulates, casting fractured prisms across the barren plains. Two armies faced one another on the cracked basalt. The Imperial Legion, in gleaming carapace armor, ranks of war automata clanking into position, and the defenders of Veltros 9 Academy, a motley assembly of cadets and veteran Marines clustered behind hastily erected energy barriers. Each side bristled with ordnanced resolve, yet neither expected the power that was about to awaken. General Mavros had issued final orders just moments before. Cadets rested fingers on pulse rifles. Officers barked calibrations to turret crews. The air thrummed with anticipation, a living thing vibrating between two hostile wills. Alara Denshara stood alone on a slight rise overlooking the frontier, the obsidian shard cradled in her gauntleted hands. Her breath was steady, heart calm as a mountain pool. She wore no armor, only the Academy uniform, but already the world around her felt altered by her presence. At the far horizon, the Imperial war drums sounded, mass driver cannons charging, plasma lances humming. A deep resonance rolled across, the plain like thunder before rain. Cadets flinched at the sound. Some clutched at their helmets as though to muffle the coming roar. Alara closed her eyes and listened, not to the guns but to the silence that had once followed Deathworld's final bombardment, a silence so complete it shattered minds. She raised the shard. Its phosphorescent veins pulsed with a pale blue glow trailing light along its faceted surface. In that moment the world held its breath. The last ray of the suns fell upon her lifted arm, and for a heartbeat, the land bathed in brilliance. Then came the click. It began at one end of the line. An Imperial soldier's rifle went dead. The soldier swung his head bewildered as the rifle's targeting sensors winked out and the barrel froze mid-aim. A second click and the next soldier's plasma carbine shut down. Within seconds, magazine feeds clattered to the ground as every weapon along the front line glitched into inoperable silence. War automata froze in mid-stride, their joint servos locked. A hushed shock rippled first through the Imperial ranks, then across the defenders. They too paused, uncertain whether the silence was friend or foe. General Mavros staggered forward, eyes wide, as his command vox sputtered into nothing. From his belt, emergency flares and hand grenades slipped through, his fingers clanging hollowly on basalt. Alara's lips moved, though no sound emerged. In her mind, she spoke to the shard, weaving her will into its resonance. A low hum radiated off its surface, expanding outward in concentric waves that refracted the air itself. The sound waves dissolved, yet the psychic pulse remained, an echo that seized every electronic circuit and every trembling heartbeat. She felt the pulse surge through her veins, a shiver of power so vast it made the world itself seem fragile. Memories of Deathworld intertwined with the present, the shriek of breaking earth, the hush after the last tremor, and finally, the utter stillness. With a final mental thrust, she shaped that stillness into an impossibly potent force. All across the battlefield, even the wind seemed to stop. Dust motes hung suspended in midair. The suns paused on their arc. Alara opened her eyes. The soldiers, the Marines, the hulking dreadnoughts beyond. They were statues, frozen in a tableau of war. Not a single creature stirred. Time stretched, a vast expanse of silent eternity. In that quiet, Alara heard every unspoken thought. The soldier yearning for home, the cadet regretting her choice, the pilot praying the shields would hold. And in the heart of her own mind, she felt the final echo of her dead world, a lament so profound it could swallow galaxies. Then, as if released by an unseen hand, the world exhaled. Weapons rebooted with a flicker of sparks. The war automata's servos whined back to life. The gust of a returning breeze rattled power armor. Alara let the shard settle into her palm and watched as soldiers staggered, disoriented, blinking in the sudden cacophony of resumed war. But the pause had done its work. Fear rippled through the Imperial Legion as if a spell had been cast. The frontline cruisers, mirrored in the cadets' awestruck eyes, turned to behold the lone girl who had stilled their engines and froze their weapons. Officers barked new orders, but voices quavered. Radios spat static. Discipline unraveled. General Mavros descended the rise and reached Ilara's side, kneeling to meet her gaze. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the freshness of the desert breeze. "Cadet Denshara," he said, voice raw. "What have you done?" She met his question with a steady calm. "I gave them silence," she answered softly. "A silence louder than any cannon." Mavros nodded, comprehension dawning in his eyes. He rose and turned back toward the battlefield. "Hold your fire," he commanded the frozen battalion. "They can't stand against this void." From the Imperial ranks a shape detached itself, a lone officer on ornate power armor, raising both hands in a gesture of truce. His voice crackled over the reopened comms. "We surrender, do not advance." Mavros exhaled, shoulders easing for the first time that day. He gestured to Ilara. "It's your silence they fear. Let them come." The Imperial officer knelt in the dust. Behind him, rows of legionnaires dropped their weapons, helmets coming off in slow, trembling reverence. In that surreal dawn light, the two armies, once on the brink of mutual destruction, stood bound by the same profound quiet. Ilara lowered her head, turning the shard in her palm until its glow faded to a soft, steady pulse. She felt the weight of countless lives saved by her silence, and beneath it, the echo of Deathworld's final hush. In that moment, she understood that silence was not the absence of sound, but the presence of choice, the power to end a war with a thought. As the suns rose fully and the haze burned away, cadets advanced to secure the disarmed legionnaires. General Mavros placed a hand on Ilara's shoulder. "You have changed the galaxy today," he said, seldom more humbly than now. Ilara offered him the shard. "Keep it safe," she replied, "for when the silence is needed again." He took it with reverence, eyes shining. Around them, the battlefield exhaled its final tremor, the plains alive once more with hope rather than devastation. And as Ilara, Denshara stepped down from the rise, the whisper she had unleashed still roamed the horizon, an unseen roar that would echo through history. The aftermath of the Great Intervention was quieter than any battlefield should be. In the cool pre-dawn air, cadets and surrendered legionnaires worked side by side, collecting shattered blasters and guiding limp war automata into containment crates. Dust from the planes drifted in lazy tendrils across the energy barriers, but no one spoke above a hushed murmur. Each soul on that field still felt the echo of Ilara's silence lingering in their bones. General Mavros convened a council in the Academy's high chamber. Around the circular table, strategists marveled at the nonviolent capitulation of the Empire's forces. Diplomats sent urgent communique, and Admiral Montclair regarded his protégé with paternal pride. He tapped a datapad, bringing up feed after feed of transmissions praising the girl who silenced steel. Yet when Montclair addressed her, "Cadet Denshara, what would you have us do next?" Ilara simply inclined her head and offered no answer. Her silence was now not only a weapon, but a choice she guarded fiercely. By the time the twin suns reached their zenith, Feltros 9 Academy had organized a modest ceremony. Families of cadets, reporters from neighboring systems, and even a delegation of Empire envoys filed into the grand auditorium. At the center of the stage, the obsidian shard rested on a sculpted pedestal of polished white durasteel, an artifact, transformed from relic to symbol. When Ilara stepped forward, the crowd fell into reverent stillness. No applause rose, no banners waved, only a single spotlight illuminated her unmoving figure. General Mavros presented her with the Academy's highest commendation, the Star of Resonance. Yet she received it without a word, fingers brushing the cold metal before returning it to its dark velvet case. In the days that followed, life at the Academy resumed its cycle of lectures and simulations. Classrooms, once abuzz with speculation about her origins, now welcomed her as a peer rather than a mystery. Professors adjusted their tone, no longer urging her to speak, but inviting her to lead. In Professor Cow's Xenopsychic Theory seminar, Alara took her place at the front, not with answers on her lips, but with her presence commanding the room. When Cao posed a complex problem about neural dampening, she rose, traced the glyphs in the air, and let her mind paint the solution on the hollow board. The cadets fell silent, watching equations unfold as if guided by an invisible hand. And still, she never spoke. One evening, as violet dusk settled over the courtyard, a second-year student approached her. Holding a battered data tablet, she hesitated, then asked, "Cadet Denshara, will you ever tell us why you chose silence?" Alara closed her eyes, the memory of her homeworld's hush stirring within her. She placed a single finger over her lips, then pointed skyward where the stars began to wink on. With that small gesture she shared everything, that some truths were too vast for words, that silence could bear the weight of loss and summon the strength to protect countless lives. In the stillness that followed, the student bowed her head, and, all around, others followed suit. Alara turned and walked away, her footsteps quiet on the stone tiles. Behind her, only the soft susurrus of night wind accompanied a galaxy forever changed by a girl who spoke only in silence. And by the silence, she wielded to still an entire army.